Good afternoon, everyone. This is Steve Rao. I serve as a council member of the town of Morrisville, and I'm here today to host a very special virtual COVID-19 town hall where we're going to be talking about business issues and some other issues that are addressing the citizens of our state, the county, and I want to thank you all for coming. We have some very special guests today, the Secretary of State Elaine Marshall, Wake County Commissioner, former Chair of the Wake County Commission, Jessica Holmes, and John Loyack, the Vice President of Global Business Services for the Economic Development Partnership of North Carolina. Before I introduce the hosts, I want to have Rabin Karki say a word, but before we do that, I just would ask for a moment of silence and prayer for the situation in Minneapolis and what's surrounding George Floyd, just that we can pray that our country can heal and that we can live in a nation where discrimination of any kind is not tolerated. And while we pray, just for 30 seconds, I also pray for our astronauts who will be launching on SpaceX Dragon at around 3:50 Eastern Time from Cape Canaveral for the first manned mission to the space station in a decade on a rocket ship. And we pray for them and our country as they inspire us. So just join me in 10 seconds of prayer and a moment of silence, if you could. Thank you for that. And so I'm going to, before we begin the program, I'm going to be introducing the panelists, but I'm going to hand it over to Rabin Karki. We've been doing this town hall in partnership with the Nepalese community in North Carolina, and we want to thank him. This is being broadcast on their website and also the national Nepalese website, so it's being heard in multiple states. And we're also being broadcast on Radio Mirchi. I want to thank them. It'll be on 99.9 FM, high definition, 101.9 FM and 1490 AM, and also aired in Baltimore, Philadelphia, and all around the United States. And so Rabin Karki has been a longtime friend of mine. It's Asian American Heritage Month, so we wanted to partner with Asian organizations, and there's other Asian organizations that are joining this call. But we wanted to thank the Nepalese community for everything that they do, and he's been a close friend of mine. And we started Nepal Day, and Commissioner Holmes eventually led the efforts to get a proclamation done in Wake County when she was the chair for Nepal Day. But Rabin, welcome, and we'd just like you to say a few words today before we begin our program.
Thank you, Steve. On behalf of Nepal Center of North Carolina, I would like to thank you, our council member, and our longtime friend, Steve Rao, for organizing this virtual town hall. This is going to be very helpful for our community. I would like to give a special thanks to our Secretary of State, Elaine Marshall, Wake County Commissioner Jessica Holmes, and Global Business VP John Loyack. NCNC is open to working with the town of Morrisville or North Carolina to build better community, especially during this pandemic. And thank you again. Thank you, Steve. I'm gonna give back to Steve.
Well, thank you so much, Rabin, and we want to thank you and the Nepalese community of the Morrisville, the Triangle, the state of North Carolina, and any of you listening across the United States. We're very proud of the great work that you're doing in all the American community. And on that note, it's such an honor to have a very distinct panel. I could be here a long time if I were reading their bios, but I'm going to start real briefly, just introduce them, and then we're going to start off with the secretary. The first special guest is certainly one that needs no introduction, Secretary of State Elaine Marshall. She is the first female to ever win a statewide office in North Carolina, elected in 1996 to the Secretary of State's office, and before that was a state senator in our North Carolina State Senate. She's a wonderful person, a great leader. She swore me into my first office in my historical election in 2011, where I became the first Asian American elected in the region and the state. And I had the honor of traveling with her to India in what seems like a lifetime ago with her and her husband, Tommy, in a delegation to the Global Business Summit. So Madam Secretary, it's always an honor to see you. I wish it was in person. And we're glad you were here with us. We also have with us Wake County Commissioner Jessica Holmes. She is a rising star in North Carolina. She was the former chair of the Wake County Commission, serving as the youngest chair in the state, Wake County, and the state history, and also one of the youngest commissioners. She is also the Democratic nominee for Labor Commissioner. And we want to thank you, Commissioner Holmes, for all that you do for our county and our state, and we are glad to be here with us. And finally, John Loyack, who is the Vice President of Global Business Services for the Economic Development Partnership of North Carolina, which is a part of our commerce efforts in the state. He also is in charge of Business Link, the International Trade Office, and also a good friend of mine. So John, thank you for taking a wonderful summer Saturday to be with us. So now we're gonna go ahead and start off with Secretary of State Elaine. For the folks listening today, Secretary, I would want to know if you could just give us a quick overview of the Secretary of State's office and the services you provide for the citizens, because many people sometimes get confused with all the different levels of government. And then as a follow-up, talk a little bit about your office, what this pandemic means to you in terms of North Carolina's present and North Carolina's future. So we'll start with you.
Thank you very much, Steve. And I want to thank you for opening this seminar with a moment of silence for the hurting that's going on in our country. And as we all pray for healing, that that situation can resolve itself and we can become better people and trust is restored, because I'm afraid trust between policing and community is at its probably all-time low. So thank you, and thank you for that introduction. I'm delighted to be with you today. I'm so sorry that COVID has kept me from being able to attend the many festivals of the Asian American community that I so enjoy and have attended so many, particularly to our Nepalese friends. Last year I went to Nepali Day and actually met your ambassador, Kari. So I suppose he's Rabin, your first cousin, at least, you know, but was very, very nice. And I very much like from the first in height to first in flight motto for your group. It is spot on and I love it to death. And it's just absolutely wonderful. So hello to all my friends out there that I haven't seen lately, whether it's the Chinese community, whether it's the Indian community, whether it's the Nepal community, on and on and on. You add such richness to North Carolina. The Secretary of State's office is business infrastructure, and the three main things we do are the real basis of the economy. If you look at the economy of North Carolina as a three-legged stool, all of them have their origin and support within the Secretary of State's office. The first thing to support economy is business. And business formation in North Carolina happens at the Secretary of State's office. It's where all your corporations, LLCs, nonprofits, limited liability partnerships, on and on, all those different business forms are started and approved. The second leg of the economy, obviously, is banking, financing. Commercial loan documentation, liens, are filed with us. Like if you have a lien on a piece of land, it would be filed at the Register of Deeds office. But if the collateral is accounts receivable, inventory, rents and profits to be coming later on, maybe it's a whole lot of equipment for manufacturing, all of that borrowing is evidenced by the database that we have at the Secretary of State's office. Then the third leg of the economy is investing. And I'm the state securities regulator for North Carolina. So the investing public has a partner, a unbiased partner, a third disinterested third party, to be able to hold the credentials of the different people that have to be registered with us. And we have consumer protection. In the securities division, we are always on the lookout for scams, scam artists. We have regulatory authority either through administrative, civil actions, or through criminal actions. So getting back to your question on how COVID-19 and the situation is affecting us, we have been the epicenter of all sorts of business activities during these very recent days. This happened, our shutdown kind of was in March, and April 15th is a big date for corporations. That's the time when annual reports are due, just like most tax returns are due. I want to tell the public out there that even though that date has passed, if an entity has missed their annual report, it is not delinquent until June 15th. So people have a little bit of a grace period out there, and we want them to know that. So please don't get too overly anxious about that. What we found, and I think a lot of people started paying attention about the Secretary of State's office when they tried to apply for a loan for PPP or other things that they need. And they found that the very first thing that the bank did when it was doing a due diligence preliminary review came back to them and said, sorry, you are not active and current with the Secretary of State's office. So there was a tremendous rush and a tremendous amount of anxiety on the part of people. I shall not name any names, but well-known corporations in North Carolina who were not allowed to go forward with the processing of a PPP loan or these other loans that are out there because they needed to be reinstated. I want to give great credit to my staff. On one particular weekend, we worked overtime and reinstated 1,100 corporations or LLCs that needed that activity done. Now, put that in perspective, that's a small part. There are about 756,000 active corporations on our database, so it's not a very large number. However, if you're that corporation whose paperwork cannot go forward because your banker called up and said or sent an email, I'm sorry, this can't process, and you realize that time is of the essence, you can't imagine the hair on fire, as I would say. You can't imagine the frantic nature of people who needed to get this done and needed to get it done immediately. The next thing that we realized was going to be an issue, I regulate and commission all the notaries in North Carolina. So there are many, many business processes or personal processes that require a notary. Notary is required to be face-to-face, the notary and the people signing the document. Well, that just didn't fit with social distancing. So we knew we needed to do a work around that. Because the requirement of personal appearances in the statute, it was not possible under the law for the governor to waive that, because that was our first avenue to try to get that worked out with the governor's office. But because it was in the statute, and for him to manage the economy, there are different categories of power that he has or approvals that he may or may not need, depending upon whether it's a health and safety issue, whether it's managing the economy, just different laws apply. I never understood until this particular disaster. We have hurricane disasters, but we're kind of used to the processes for that. But this is different than a hurricane disaster. So we had to wait until the General Assembly came back. But I had already been personally engaged with Speaker Moore and President Pro Tem Berger and their staffs regarding what we needed, so that we had all the paperwork done, and all it had to do when they came back was to get it down in their paperwork, and that went through very smoothly. So what that allowed was we created a video opportunity for the notary to find the identity of the people, watch the signing, and then transfer the papers later, depending upon, it can all be done electronically in North Carolina if a wet signature on the document is not required. But if you're talking about, say, a motor vehicle title, that signature on the back of the title is it, and no electronic version is yet permissible in North Carolina. So we did that workaround, and we have been training electronic notaries. Usually the community college does this, but since they've been closed down, we went ahead and put our training in the can. We did a rollout. With that soft rollout, we now have several hundred more new electronic notaries who can take it on demand at a desktop. And we are rolling that opportunity out to all the other notaries in this state as of this week, so that notaries that are the traditional notary want to become an electronic notary can do that now. That's available. So those are just two of the key things that we did. Emergency video notarization. Well, it's actually three things: the extension on the annual report and all the reinstatements. Notaries are our safeguards against fraud, and this is only a temporary fix. It goes until August 1, although in our discussions with the General Assembly, everybody made it clear that now that they're back in town for their short session, if there is a need for it to be extended out beyond August 1, everybody's in agreement that that will happen. It's a matter of talking about the need. So those are the kinds of things that we've been doing to take a little bit of headache and heartache off of the shoulders of business people out there. And I will tell you that basically our business filings for new businesses have been pretty much up to par. The Marshall loan documents, we thought they would probably fall off. They would be the first indicator. And really, there has been no downturn in that. So the business community is still active and moving forward. I will also tell you that, you know, this business of the notary workaround is applicable for any type you might need, any time you might need a notary, such as advanced healthcare directives, those kind of things that people are thinking about a little bit more since we're in a medical emergency now. So those are some of the things we've been doing, Steve.
Okay, thank you very much. We're going to come back to you after we go through the round to talk a little bit about small, because we've had some questions about crowdfunding and how your business, but that was very helpful information. So I'm now going to hand it over to Commissioner Holmes, who's going to be presenting us a little bit of information, and then we'll ask her 1 or 2 questions. So let's go ahead and share those slides if we could, Ian. Commissioner, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Councilman Rao, for inviting me to join you all today. I'd also like to acknowledge that I am also joined by the current vice chair of our board, Vicki Adamson, who's with us here today. I also want to give a special acknowledgement to the Nepal Center of North Carolina for all the work that you do in our community and all of the value that you add to our community. We started this town hall off by referencing George Floyd and all of the pain that America is experiencing right now. And as we pray for healing, I'd like to address that a bit. In order for us to heal, we first have to acknowledge that there is a wound that needs to be healed. And as we pray for healing, we also need to pray for change. America is founded upon being a melting pot where we value diversity for the sake of diversity. And I just want to make clear that on behalf of the Wake County Board of Commissioners, we value all of the diversity in our community and we celebrate it for what it is in terms of it being what made America great. So thank you all for giving me the opportunity to share my piece on that. And now I will focus on our response as it relates to small businesses in Wake County. As we all acknowledge that during the stay-at-home order, our businesses, most of which were closed due to stay-at-home requirements. So we'll move on to the very first slide. Safer at home. As you all probably know, Wake County, along with the majority of North Carolina, is under the governor's stay-at-home order, which is phase 2 of his reopening plan. Safer at home means that while the order has been lifted, it's been done so with one caveat. Vulnerable populations are strongly encouraged to stay at home. It also means that restaurants are able to open at 50% capacity while following strict protocols. I, for one, cooking is not one of my talents, so one of my ways of supporting small businesses has been enjoying a lot of takeout. Even before they were able to open, there are ways to access businesses through apps like Grubhub and other delivery mechanisms, but I encourage you all to continue to support those businesses, particularly in the time of their limited capacity. Salons, personal care establishments, I know we were all anxious to get our haircuts and get our hair done, but please be mindful that when you do visit salons, please try to make sure that you are social distancing as much as possible, that you're wearing a mask, that your stylist is wearing a mask. We have allowed pools to open, but at 50% capacity. Right now, certain businesses and facilities remain closed. One of the things that I keep hearing about are gyms, the fact that gyms are not open yet. My response to that is Wake County has many beautiful parks. We have many beautiful city and municipal parks and greenways and ways for folks to get out and about and enjoy nature right now and still be able to exercise. And going to the next slide, the next phase is phase 3, which we expect further loosening of restrictions on businesses and facilities. For example, our restaurants will have increased capacity. like in restaurants, bars, other businesses, and houses of worship. Going into the next slide, our ability to be able to start easing restrictions is quite frankly in your hands. As long as we follow proper protocols now, social distancing when possible, wearing a mask, being safe, those things will allow us to, as quickly as possible, move into the very next phase. So I encourage you all to continue doing all that you're doing to stay safe and make sure that even in the case of people who are asymptomatic, that we are all being responsible. So as you can see on the screen, we have several health tips. Some of this seems to be common sense, so I won't preach to the choir because I know all of you are doing these things. But just as a reminder, be sure to wash your hands as often as possible. Avoid touching your face. Most people don't realize how many times a day, quite frankly, how many times a minute we actually touch our face. So be mindful. We have lots of information on the Wake County government website on precautions that you can take. Now I'd like to move into the economic impact on the next slide that we acknowledge everyone's feeling, including the county, who right now is facing a significant budget shortfall due to a reduction in sales tax revenue, as concerts haven't been able to happen. We haven't been able to have conventions at the convention center, no sports at the PNC arena. So right along with you, we are feeling the pain and understand the challenges that many people within our community are facing right now. Making decisions to close businesses was not an easy one, and it's not something that we took lightly, but at the time it was the right thing to do. We recognize that small businesses are the backbone of our economy, and the fact that the economy is in the state that it's in right now is evidence of how important our small businesses are, not just in providing services, but because they employ so many of our workers. So let me tell you a bit more on the next slide about our program, Wake Forward. Vice Chair Vicki Adamson, who I mentioned was joining us, was instrumental in helping me, along with several other commissioners, lead on providing a small business loan initiative that is paid for out of CARES Act funding. Initially, I worked really hard personally to try to provide grants to small businesses. I believe then and I believe right now that small businesses need grants. I think it's unrealistic to think that many of our small businesses, some of whom have been closed for 2 months, some of whom are still not open, that they can realistically pay back loans. That said, due to restrictions due to state law, we were unable to provide grants. Even though the federal government allowed us to provide grants, we were essentially blocked by state law from being able to do so. That said, we knew we wanted to help in whatever way that we could help within the parameters of the law. Hence, Wake Forward. The program is a part of our COVID-19 rapid recovery efforts. It's a loan program that is administered by the North Carolina Rural Economic Development Center. It allows small businesses to apply for 2 months of lost revenues up to $50,000. We put forward the best loan terms that we could. For the first 6 months of the loan, there is no repayment, for example. We tried to make sure that we had one of the lowest interest rates. As I mentioned earlier, had it been up to me, it would have been a 0% loan because it would have been a grant, not a loan. But again, we were restricted in how we move forward with that. We have allocated $5 million of CARES Act funding, $1 million of which I was responsible for restricting for sole proprietors and independent contractors. The reason this was so important to me personally was because I had a conversation with a barbershop owner who said, I appreciate you advocating for me, but what about my employees? What about the people that have a chair in my shop or who have rented a space in my building? Many of the business owners were very honest in saying, I'm so behind on my rent, I'm behind on my mortgage, that realistically the money that they were going to receive through loans or grants were not going to trickle down to their employees. So we wanted to make sure that we set some funds aside for people that, you know, maybe a photographer, people in the barbershop and salon industry, nail techs, whereas their business owners might be able to get a loan, but you know, they maybe wouldn't qualify. So that was a very important set aside. As you can see on the screen, we've detailed who can apply for the loan. Most of the criteria is pretty straightforward. As long as your business is located within Wake County and you have fewer than 100 full-time employees, we want to be honest and we want to make sure this money actually went to small businesses. So that is why we capped full-time employees at 100. So that means it's open to all businesses in Wake County. That goes from your small retailers, local restaurants, your mom and pop shops. And you know, the goal is to make sure we got this to the people who really needed it. And we have created essentially an outreach team, because what we were also seeing was in some of the larger small businesses in particular, they were getting possibly multiple loans. And what we didn't want to happen in Wake County was that, you know, one business get 2 or 3 loans and one business not get any. So we have worked really hard to make sure that all of our businesses are aware of this program and that everyone has a fair opportunity to receive these funds. I know with lots of funds that have been offered by other government agencies, the money has run out very quickly. And the reality is there's more need than there is money out there. So we want to be very intentional about making sure this money reached our truly small businesses. In the next slide, I want to share about some of our just efforts to communicate this to the public. We've been using social media. We have been using all of our channels. It's on the Wake County government website. And again, we have a team of people whose job it is right now is to essentially do community outreach. So as you can see here on the slide, I didn't get my way in terms of getting a grant program, but to be clear, this is a loan program that must be paid back. But again, we attempted to get the most favorable terms as possible. Going to the next slide, in terms of, you know, what have we done to try to get the word out? This shows just a couple more examples of that. One thing I want to note regarding your Wake County Board of Commissioners specifically, Wake County had the very first case of COVID in the state of North Carolina. The first official case of COVID in the state of North Carolina. From that moment forward, we have been focused on serving the community in every way that we feel matters the most in terms of basic necessities, housing. It is very difficult to tell someone to stay at home when they don't have a home. So we immediately invested millions of dollars into housing and to ensuring hotels for our homeless population, our homeless families. Many of you may not know that we literally have thousands of children in the Wake County public school system who live in hotels all across the county. So we have a very, unfortunately, healthy hotel population in Wake County. Many of these people, you know, work in the service industry and either lost their jobs completely or their income was significantly reduced. So we also did a set aside to help those families who are currently living in hotels to help them stay there. We also focused on food insecurity. Many of the students that are on free and reduced price lunch, about a third of Wake County's 160,000 students are on free or reduced price lunch. We have made monumental efforts with the school system to identify those children and to continue ensuring that those families have access to food. So on the next slide, in terms of community outreach, I just want to make clear that you can find our website at wakegov.com/COVID-19 in terms of finding staying up to date with the latest information regarding COVID-19. You'll also see a wealth of resources as to what we're doing and what you might be eligible for. So I encourage you to check that out. Also, if you notice on the screen, and if we go to the next slide, our website is translated into the top 10 languages spoken in our Wake County communities. Our site is now translated from English, and this is something that our board was very specific about in terms of directing our staff, because you can't communicate to people if you don't communicate in their language. And so I want to be clear that we now translate our website into Spanish, traditional and simplified Chinese, Hindi, Arabic, Tamil, French, Vietnamese, Telugu, and Korean. And this is an incredibly important initiative. Although we weren't able to translate every language, this is a step in the right direction for Wake County in terms of attempting to communicate with all of our people. And going to the next slide, I just want to share that it's a tough time in Wake County. It's a tough time in our country. It seems that we are not only facing a pandemic as it relates to COVID, but a pandemic related to our morality as a country. And I just want to make clear that I am an ally, that Wake County is an ally, and that we will continue as leaders to lead accordingly to our beliefs that we are a place that welcomes and celebrates diversity. And I think it's very important that I acknowledge that, and I want to close on that point.
Commissioner, thank you so much. And we're going to hear from John Loyack, and then we're going to come back for the Secretary of State. And we're going to spend about 12 more minutes, and then we're going to open it up to the questions, which are going to be submitted via chat or from the Facebook streams that we're being sharing with Secretary Marshall and my site and Commissioner Holmes. I want to thank Commissioner Adamson for being here, and we want to remind everyone she's also leading the census effort. So don't forget to find out about the census and how we can get involved and get our participation rates up. But Vice Chair, thank you for being with us. We're now going to have John Loyack. John, we want to, following up on that great presentation from Commissioner Holmes, so much great information there along with Secretary of State. So tell just the audience a little bit about EDPNC, just real high level, and then talk a little bit about addressing the frustration that businesses are feeling. Obviously a little bit less with the leadership of the commissioners, but still I'm hearing from businesses that they're not able to get their loans, the unemployment is lagged behind, disaster relief, how do they get that? And what can they do with EDPNC and commerce? You know, how can they turn to the state agencies which report up to the governor of how we can help revitalize our economy?
Sure. Well, Steve, let me begin. Councilman Brown, thanks very much for having me here today. It's a pleasure to be here with this group of distinguished panelists. And I'd like to echo, I can't possibly improve upon the comments made by Secretary Marshall or Commissioner Holmes, but I would say that, you know, we would share those sentiments. And this is a difficult time for us, but I just want to remind all the folks on the call that as a person who essentially is out there selling North Carolina on every given day, North Carolina is a very diverse and inclusive, welcoming place. And I commend everything that's being done by Wake County just to reach out to people in local languages. That is something that just gives you an idea of what a diverse community we have here. I mean, North Carolina is the place where you find over 200 Japanese businesses that have established themselves here over the last 30 years. The first one that was here was a true pioneer, but since then, the others, they recognize that this is a good place to do business. This is a place where they can achieve their dreams, and so they've come here. We have a growing Hmong population out in the Morganton, Lenoir, and Hickory area, more than 10,000 people who have passed the word out to relatives all over the country and the world that this is a great place to do business and a great place to start a family and have a job and have all those other securities that the basic securities that people are looking for. Population of Siler City is more than 50% Latino. It's something I'm proud of, and it's something that just lets people see what an amazing fabric we have. I will say this, we've got to continue to make things better. You know, I had a long talk last night with my son about this, and he's torn up like so many Americans are. And I've let them know that it's up to us to make this better. We as individuals can stand up, find that one thing that you believe in, and you can do some amazing things. But with that, I'd like to focus on some of the amazing things we can do for small businesses as well. In my role, I serve as the Vice President of Global Business Services for the Economic Development Partnership of North Carolina. This is the organization that provides a variety of critical economic development functions on the state's behalf, including tourism promotion. And I would tell you this very simply, one of the industries that has been hit the hardest is the tourism industry. For those of you who are wondering what kind of an economic impact that has on the state of North Carolina, it's over $25 billion in economic impact. And those businesses have been crushed. We are coming into and are in the midst of what is typically one of our hottest seasons for that industry. And that's one that we at the EDPNC and all the other organizations in the state will need to continue to stand behind to get our hospitality, our lodging, our restaurants, and the tourism industry up and running as quickly as we can. There are a variety of things that we're doing to support that industry. We're also the group that's recruiting new industry into the state. And so I'm happy to say that, you know, while the pipeline has slowed some, we are still seeing new opportunities every day. Places like Wake County are a great place to do business. You know, when you look at the tax structure, when you look at the dedication of leaders like Commissioner Holmes and others, when you look at the educational opportunities we have here, the infrastructure, just the overall workforce that's available here, it's a great place to do business. And it's one that we will continue to dedicate ourselves to attracting new businesses to make sure that North Carolina companies have the opportunities, or North Carolina individuals have the opportunities that they need. But as a shift to what I do for the Economic Development Partnership, I would share that I am focused on existing industry. I do that in a number of different ways. We have a small business counseling team, and I have a 1-800 number I'd love to share with the audience. It's 1-800-228-8443. And this is a fantastic unit that we call Business Link North Carolina. These are folks who are taking calls on a daily basis and routing them to a variety of different partners, including the Secretary of State's office, all of our partners on the Wake County level, and folks all over the state take advantage of this organization. It's one that can help with licensing issues. It's one that can help understand how business can make sure they're paying their taxes properly. It's how to make sure you've got your annual report submitted to the Secretary of State's office properly. There are a variety of things that this group is focused on and can help with. Today, though, they are largely focused on a variety of different things. It's been relief efforts. It saddens me a bit to say that we actually have quite a bit of experience in this area. You know, as Secretary Marshall mentioned, we are a state that is impacted by hurricanes every single year. We do have wildfires in the western part of the state. We do see the occasional tornado blow through. And at times like that, I think the strength of a state is the response that those communities see from a variety of different partners. So we find ourselves on the front line of these things every single day. Our Business Link team is a team that is handling calls from folks who want to know about the Wake Forward program. They want to know what the city of Raleigh is doing, or the city of Apex and some of those new programs. They want to know what Morrisville is doing, businesses in Morrisville are doing. And so it's a fantastic unit that is used to dealing with these situations. A couple of things I'd like to share with this group, and just I'll close my comments with just a kind of a brief couple of highlights on what we do to support small businesses and some of the things I want this audience to be aware of. Number one, at a time like this, businesses want to know what their funding options are. They want to know how to get through that SBA process, whether it's a EIDL or a PPP, or what are the things that the state's making available? What's the county or my local municipality making aware of? These are the ones who know. And so we direct a lot of traffic to that organization to let people know that we've got somebody on their side who can help them. Believe it or not, through all this, we're actually taking a lot of calls from people who are trying to start a business. You know, the entrepreneurial spirit here in the state is strong. And even though over a million people here in North Carolina have been impacted by this current situation, they are looking to pivot, open up a new business, try something new. I will say this, a few months back when we had people calling and saying they wanted to open a restaurant, we did say we might want to wait on that idea a little bit. But it is amazing to kind of see the spirit that exists here in the state. And I think a state like ours, we can be measured by the type of response we give those people. So a lot of the calls that we've been taking at this point have been about funding options. You know, how do I make sure I get the support I need? And Commissioner Holmes did mention some of the, you know, the struggles that businesses are going to have. This is not something that's going to be gone in a month or two. You know, a 2-month bridge loan is not going to be enough. This is a situation we're going to deal with for some time to come. The one thing I would say that concerns me more than most, and it's something that Secretary Marshall mentioned at the beginning of the call, is that this is the type of situation where predatory lenders, scams, and other types of situations do tend to pick up. We deal with it every time a hurricane hits. Someone is contacted via the internet by an unregulated lender, and they get a deal that is too good to seem true. And guess what? It is. So we end up helping folks dig out from those situations 6 months after a hurricane has hit. What I would say is lean on that 1-800 number and tap into a group of people who know who the legitimate lenders are that exist in the state. North Carolina is blessed with a fantastic network of nonprofit lenders, groups like the Carolina Small Business Development Fund, the Rural Center, Mountain BizWorks, and others who are found all over the state who are in place to help. Just in case anyone on the call is wondering what keeps John Loyack awake at night, I would tell you this. We have over 900,000 small businesses in the state of North Carolina. I know that not all of them are going to be open 6 months from now. This is something that will have a major impact on our rural main streets here in Wake County, as well as all over the state. I want to keep them going. I want to give them the tools that they need, but it's going to be a difficult climb. It's going to be, you know, the old expression of it being a marathon and not a sprint is very, very true here. This is something that we are going to have to work towards dragging ourselves out of for some time to come. But as we get out of this situation, what I would say is a lot of the pieces are in place to create a really exciting, dynamic, diverse employment opportunity here in the state of North Carolina. We've got some fantastic tools. We want more people to be aware of them. Final group I'd mentioned, Steve, is our international trade team as well. I think all those small businesses in North Carolina, I'd like to remind them, and as being here as a part of Asian American Heritage Month, I have to say that, you know, North Carolina is it's a state that I think is one of the most globally engaged in the nation. We are the ones who really are focused on international outreach in a variety of ways, whether that's providing someone with, you know, their native language instructions here on a county level, or whether it's us and the fact that the state of North Carolina has had an international trade office in the city of Hong Kong for over 30 years. We are dedicated to international opportunities. We will continue to sell North Carolina made products all over the world. That's one of the things that's going to help us get out of this particular situation. We're going to continue to recruit foreign direct investment opportunities from all over the world. We'll continue to offer opportunities for international students that want to come and study here. We'll continue to offer international language classes in our elementary schools. This is the way that a state shows that they are focused on being an open, diverse, inclusive environment, one that is focused on what a wonderfully international world we live in. And so those are just a few of the things I wanted to share. There's some fantastic opportunities, and I think it all starts with that 1-800 number. But happy to turn it back over to you and take any questions.
Thank you so much, John. You've given us a lot of really great information. We're going to come back to you for one final question and then open it up. But we want to go back to the Secretary of State. Madam Secretary, you all help businesses form, LLCs, and you know, what are some other things the Secretary of State's office can do to assist small businesses? I've been getting some tweets already this morning about crowdfunding and different things. So are there any kinds of ideas that you have or options out there for people to consider? And what advice do you have to small businesses today that are struggling?
Well, I think John really summarized it up. We have a lot of resources here Folks don't need to be bashful. I often tell folks there is no wrong door. If it's a consumer complaint, we will sort it out with the Attorney General's office. If it's a business activity, a business need, we refer back and forth to all types of organizations here at all levels. So folks just need to avail themselves of that number. Folks need to ask questions, and you know, all of us in this are public servants, and I think North Carolina truly has committed, dedicated public servants to making things work for the people they serve. The question about crowdfunding is available here in North Carolina. It saves an awful lot of money rather than the route of a public offering. Now, it is not for major fundraising, but it is $2 million and under. And there are two different ways to go. What people really need to do is go to sosnc.gov and look up investing, and then read about the differences. And there's a little bit more paperwork with those that are, say, over $1 million to $2 million. But you know, you as a baker, as a barber shop, can raise money from your customers, and that's permissible here under crowdfunding in North Carolina. There are some rules that go along with it, like an escrow agent, and it can't be a Ponzi scheme. You have to hold on to the money until a certain amount has been raised, because if you just raise a little and spend it, and then raise some more and spend it, and raise a little and spend it, you know, that basically gets you into the Ponzi scheme area, and that's not a very good place to be. Part of our mandate is consumer protection, and just as John mentioned, whether it's charitable things, whether it's investing things, we're seeing folks soliciting for companies that don't exist or they're sound alike. There's been a wave of PPP investment. There's always the pitch of whatever's new or whatever's hopeful in the paper, like the newest treatment or the newest vaccine. We've seen a lot of that stuff going around. There's been some cease and desist activities going on for some of these enterprising crooks who are trying to sell these things. And I want to talk a little bit more about protecting people's health in these times. You don't think about the Secretary of State's office as being engaged in health, but we're the trademark registrar, and pharmaceuticals falls under that. I know people don't want to go out, especially senior citizens. You're not supposed to go out. I also know that money is tight. And so when you add the combination of people wanting to stay at home and trying to make their dollars go as far as they possibly can, people get on the internet and Google. And the federal government has told us that 97% of the pharmacies online that represent themselves as Canadian pharmacies are not legitimate. They are not Canadian pharmacies. They just send stuff from someplace else and then ship it from Canada here. There is a tool that is available that we have a grant to promote. It's called verifybeforeyoubuy.org. Just take those words, put them together, verifybeforeyoubuy.org. And if you're looking, if you have done the following, if you look for blood pressure medicine and you've come up upon a website and you think they've got the best prices, copy that URL, go to verifybeforeyoubuy.org, and then paste that information in there. And it will tell you whether or not that pharmacy is legitimate pharmacy, a rogue pharmacy, or it can't tell. The search engine to do this project, the background part of it, was put together by investors who are interested in electronic commerce being successful and not a ripoff. There is not one penny of pharmaceutical money in this, so people need to be well advised about that. It's folks like Microsoft, FedEx, UPS, people who are in the electronic commerce infrastructure business. They want buying and selling online to work. And our partners here in North Carolina are the Academy of Family Physicians, the retail merchants, the Chamber of Commerce, the Council of Churches, the SHIP program, the Justice Center. AARP is a huge partner in this program. So we want people to have medicines that are what they're supposed to be, not something that is inadequate for whatever is being treated, or worse than that, something that contains some kind of toxic or bacterial agent that you would be bringing into your body. In America, if we plug it in the wall or take it in our body, we expect the product to be safe. And if we're not vigilant, that's no longer going to be true. And it's hard to tell about medicine. That's why verify before you buy is very, very important. And after all, you're giving your credit card information to somebody who's, is ripping you off. And so you've given them some pieces of information that will allow them to do that again in the future. So, but my also other important point is contacting those of the agencies that are represented by those of us here and others like insurance and attorney general. There is no wrong door. We will go out of our way to get you to the right place.
Thank you so much. We're going to come back to you at the end. Commissioner Holmes has a 2 o'clock engagement, and you did such a great job in your presentation. You gave us so much information, so we're probably going to open it up here on the floor. If you have a question on chat or Facebook, please send it in now. Commissioner, the question I want to ask you is, first of all, I want to thank Chairman Ford and the committee for thinking of municipalities as partnerships. And I know that we can work at COVID-19 related expenses. We were a part of the stay-at-home orders, and the mayors and the councils across the county were involved in that. So I'm going to save you a question and just say thank you. And we will work with our staff to make sure how we participate in the monies that are going to be allocated. My question has to do with entrepreneurship and technology. So over the last few weeks, I've been getting a lot of emails from entrepreneurs that are developing contract tracing applications in terms of and there's been a lot of press recently about Google and Apple and analytics companies. And so if an entrepreneur emails me today to say, I'd like to get in front of Wake County to help spread the COVID virus, but do it through technology and innovation, where do I direct them to?
For starters, in addressing your first question, Wake County has received $194 million in CARES Act funding. Many counties, that funding went directly to the state, but because our population exceeds 1 million residents, Wake County received a direct allocation from the federal government. And we have information on our website about how we are spent. They must be spent directly related to COVID-19 response. So I want to make that clear. And while it sounds like a lot of money, there's also a lot of need. We are being very intentional about making sure those funds get to the right organizations and impact the people with the greatest need in Wake County. As to how people can reach us in general, Wake County government has not missed a beat. We have continued meeting, lots of meetings. Government likes to meet. Our meetings are being held virtually. You can watch our meetings online. You can still submit public comments. If you'd like to email the board directly, we have a general email that is commissioners@wakegov.com. commissioners@wakegov.com. And I will, to make sure that I have that right, in just a moment, I will post that in the comment section. But that is the best way to reach the board. And again, we are still having all of our regularly scheduled board meetings. They're done so virtually. There's also the opportunity to submit public comments to the board in advance of those meetings.
Thank you so much. I'm going to start with one, and then I'm going to basically have everyone feed in on this question before. And while we're waiting, please, if you have a question, please, some of them are texting me the questions, and those are the questions I'm asking, but please, if you're on Facebook listening, we can go a little bit over 2 o'clock. I know the commissioner has to leave at 2. But I'm going to start with John, and then maybe everyone can give me the feedback. But okay, so John, we're seeing a lot of companies like Facebook, Twitter, Google move to teleworking now. They've announced that no longer will they require folks to work in an office. Microsoft, we recently were, celebrating the 500 jobs at the Wake County Commissioners meeting there, where we announced the expansion. So how is teleworking going to affect economic development? Because if I'm a business, I may not want to invest in, I don't know if it's going to happen, but will we see less office space? And Michael Lango talked about 150 million cut in the budget. Travel is down 97%. So this is going to affect our hotels, our businesses. So what is your thought? And how is commerce going to have to look at these trends? Because there's a lot that we don't know.
Sure. You know, Steve, to answer that, what I'd say is what I've learned in my years in economic development is that when you're selling a state like North Carolina or a county like Wake, it is so much more than just an office space. Before all of this really began to sink in, the overall pandemic situation that we're in, I would say that the conversations that we were having with businesses, whether they be ones expanding here in the state or ones that were looking at coming into the state, were all about our workforce. They wanted to know, and businesses were only going to move to places where they knew they could find qualified workforce. So in the world of economic development, qualified workforce is like currency. It's your natural resource. You've either got it or you don't. And I will tell you this, as Amazon and others did some of their big searches a few years ago, they places like Raleigh, and they said they've got it. They've got a lot of the pieces that we need. Ultimately, they decided to settle in small markets like DC and New York, but this was, I think, a reflection of everything that we have to offer. And so what I'm saying to you is, when it comes to winning that next opportunity, it's not just about where our teleworkers can be or the fact that they could all be based remotely. Where do those people want to send their children to school, Steve? That's going to be a question they ask themselves. You know, will they have the type of communities where they have a nightlife, where we can go out to the type of restaurants that we're looking for? What do the highways look like? Because people are, even if they're working from home, they're still going to need to get out. What's the quality of their airport? Because these are, even though folks are here from 9 to 5 on Monday through Friday, they're still going to be looking to leave the area on weekends. And having a direct flight to Paris, for example, does not hurt as we try to recruit new businesses into the state. So economic development is so much more than just where do we locate this building. If there was an area that, if I had that opportunity to make a wish come true right now, I would say that this particular experience helps us look at the fact that our broadband network, for example, can use some significant improvement. We know that there are very dark spots in the state that just aren't getting the type of access that they need. And this is critical. It's not just about helping that remote employee work. It's about that employee's children and their ability to get on to their online classes as well. And so if I could put a challenge out there to North Carolinians, it would be focus on that, put some effort into that, because that's something that's going to be a critical part of our future and our ability to bring in more businesses.
We want to thank Commissioner Holmes for being with us today, and that was very helpful information. Sorry, I muted there for a second. Commissioner Holmes has given us all the information. We have a few more minutes. We're going to now open it up to questions. One thing I'd like you to address before we leave is, and we might start with the secretary, but we're going to wait a minute to see questions, and I'm just going to share my thoughts, is that, you know, I think a lot of people want to know what a new normal may look like, because I think that transportation right now in North Carolina is being disrupted. 300 million shortfall, 20 million below legally required limits. We've heard from our airport CEO at a Triangle J meeting recently about what's going to happen there. You know, what is it going to look like when we do open back up in terms of just social gathering? We are social creatures. And I mean, I want to go hear the Secretary of State speak in person. Are we going to have those kinds of events? I mean, I could go on, but the question is, how will this impact our policy and moving forward? Because I think that some people think, well, we're going to get a vaccine and everything's going to come back to the way it was. But I think the other side of it is, it may never be the worst. And it's not just North Carolina. It's, you know, it's going to affect cities in the U.S., cities around the world. So just food for thought before we close out. I'd just love to get your opinions about that as leaders in our state.
Well, Steve, I don't have a real good crystal ball. It's a little foggy a lot of times. But I don't think we'll ever get back to where we were before. But I also don't think that we will be in the situation that we are right now. I think we're going to be somewhere in between. I think office space is going to be reconfigured so that we do have our social activities, but social distancing. I can speak for my employees. We were not overly prepared to go to teleworking. If somebody had told me in January I should have been buying about 50 laptops to be able to send people home, I'd have told them they were nuts, because you just don't go buy out in technology equipment like that, not knowing that you have a need for it. I also have some employees that don't have internet service at their homes. And John mentioned spot on, we need serious deployment of high-speed broadband across this state to have that workforce that we need in places other than the big urban areas. And the question I get asked all the time is, what can we do to make more industry go to rural, smaller counties? Well, improve the schools, improve the workforce, and high-speed broadband is a key part to that. I work with counties on individual levels as people come to me, but I think some of us in government have been talking about moving out certain units to areas, but we have to have broadband in order to do that. State government can do some things to help economic development, but that broadband aspect is crucial, and the education is also crucial. So what will change state government is also what changes business, and vice versa. I think Mike Walden said it, and some other economists have said that people will be leaving the large urban areas like New York, Chicago, Los Angeles to go to smaller areas, because in New York's case, they've been through 9/11, and now they've been through what they've been through there. And a lot of people are deciding that they don't want to raise their children in that environment anymore, or they're just a little too scared to be in that large and urban center when things like what can just happen to us. I think we will be a beneficiary of that. We can't help but be a beneficiary of that. But we'd like to get that brain power coming to places other than Raleigh and Durham. I know we're all centered on Raleigh, Durham, and all, but I'd like to see more of it go down towards Pitt County and around. I'd like to see more of it go to Western Carolina, so that we've got more income equality and opportunity equality out there. Broadband is a key part of that. Part of my job is also as a member of the local government commission. Prior to going into this, for many years, we have had towns in North Carolina that were based upon some, I don't know, cut and sew plant, some other manufacturer company, and the town or the county built out a water system to support that. That was part of what they put into the deal. They went into debt for that. A lot of those organizations, those plants have closed down. They have moved elsewhere, whether it's elsewhere in this country or outside of this country. We have aging water systems, sewer systems in a lot of places of towns that now are primarily filled with fixed income individuals. New business is not necessarily going there, and they are already hurting prior to this COVID. Now, as revenues are down from the hospitality industry and people traveling and buying things and moving around, and consumer buying is down, people don't have the jobs. Local governments are going to be in a serious deficit position. Even our state agencies, tax revenues, people are not buying gasoline, so therefore the Department of Transportation doesn't have that available to them. So as government folks, we are going to have to make some very hard decisions and some very wise planning as we try to maintain a certain quality of life for the people in all these towns who need these basic human resources. It's not anything extravagant. It's clean water and decent sewer. Nobody wants to live in a place that doesn't have that. So those are real challenges that government's going to be facing in the next decade, and I hope it only lasts a decade. It may be longer than that.
That was just such an excellent answer to that question. John, any parting thoughts? And we're going to wait a few minutes to take some questions, but any parting thoughts?
Sure. I'll just say that I'm often accused of being a person who always looks for the silver lining and the positive out of any situation. And I don't want to be seen, I don't want to seem as an opportunist, but what I will say is, we are struggling, but, North Carolinians are known, and Secretary Marshall mentioned this, for our textile industry. We've got almost 40,000 folks employed by different textile businesses. We still grow cotton, we spin yarn, we make fabric, we make garments. We're still doing those things here. And so if I was looking for a silver lining in this particular situation, I would say I'm looking at the PPE industry and more of the overall supply chain coming back to the US. We're starting to hear a lot of talk about that. I know Senator Tillis has drafted along with 2 other senators, has drafted a bill that would bring some of that industry back here. And North Carolina needs to be prepared for those opportunities when they come. We are already beginning to see them coming in. These are folks who, for years, have taken the easy way out and looked for very cheap wage employees and done things overseas, whether that be down in Central America, Southeast Asia, or China. And now those opportunities are coming back here. I think we as consumers need to continue to support businesses that are here, whether that's your local restaurant or that's a local manufacturer. We've got to go out of our way to do what we can to support our neighbors and the other folks who are part of our community. But I think we'll see some of those things coming back here, Steve.
We want to thank you all so much for being here today. We're going to wait just a few minutes if we have any extra questions, but this has been such an informative program. I can't thank you enough, Secretary Marshall and John and Commissioner Holmes for being here. And this was played on the radio all around the Triangle and the country. I think as I close out, you'll see behind me, and I want to thank the Nepalese community of North Carolina and the different organizations that help promote this, along with Radio Murchie. But you'll see behind me in about an hour and 15 minutes, we'll be celebrating the launch of SpaceX, which will be the first man into space in a rocket in about a decade. And we're celebrating immigration and inclusivity and diversity. And Elon Musk came here on an H-1B visa, was an immigrant who came to America, and look at what he's done. He's leading the next generation of spaceflight. And as we are in a period of uncertainty, what makes my day is the fact that, I think of space flight and I think back to President Kennedy's challenge to the American people. Why do we send man to the moon? We do things because they are hard, not because they are easy. And we think of the movie Hidden Figures, where Katherine Johnston, an African-American scientist, helped bring John Glenn back to the Earth safely. And we think of Apollo 13, when Gene Kranz, who I had the honor of hearing it speak in Wilmington, who was the flight director for the Apollo missions, in the movie said that failure is not an option. And I look at this opportunity of bringing our men back safe in a technical nightmare as NASA's greatest success, not failure. And so I think that we should leave today knowing that we don't know all the answers, but we do know that if we work together as Americans, there's no limit to what we can do, and North Carolinians. And so that's just my message to each of you and to those listening today. I'm very proud. I can't wait to see the rocket take off. It's always an emotional moment when we see what can happen. I don't know if you all feel like that, but when you see the thrusters and the countdown, it just makes you feel so proud. And we can think back to when Neil Armstrong put his foot on the moon. Years later, we can watch it and still tear up a little bit. I want to thank each of you for being here. And if there's any questions, please chime in now, or we're going to close out and let these great leaders get on with a nice summer day. And I know they've got other things to do. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you, Steve.
Bye.